So try to be sync with the presentation. At any point of time you find yourself lost over there, you can interrupt me, but try to, and even you should be pay attention. You should pay attention when we jump from one segment to another segment. So this is the outline of my talk. Renal replacement therapy. First, initial will have a little bit a glimpse of the renal failure, severity of AKI and indication of RRT. Very brief kind of this thing. Few things you already discussed in the acute kidney injury. Second would be a principle of RRT. Techniques of RRT is more related to the training part, or that's why we'll little bit fast skip over there. Less important in examination, but of course the most important in the clinical setting where you really want to participate in the renal replacement therapy personally. Review of evidence, hybrid therapy, and take home message. So I start with the first segment, renal failure, severity of AKI and indication of RRT. Causes of acute renal failure, classically we divide into the three part, pre-renal, renal and the post-renal. Classical things which is a purely from the acute kidney injury and the requirement of the renal replacement therapy. Most of the things we take account in the further in terms of the severity. Severity, initially it was described by the Reifel criteria, now commonly used as a Kittiguk staging of AKI. As a clinician, probably you might not require so much scores in the bedside. Most of the things bedside tells yourself about the severity of AKI. This scoring is more useful when you are comparing from one ICU to another ICU, or you are having some research paper audit over there. The next come to from here, gradually we are shifting our focus to the importance of renal replacement therapy. First segment is renal replacement and the second segment is renal support. That term is coined purely in the ICU, renal support. I'll give you a little bit brief over there. Life-threatening condition, obviously you require hyperkalemia, acidosis, pulmonary edema and uremic complication. That is the classical, no doubt about the renal replacement therapy, but sometimes you can really think about the renal replacement therapy to control the solute, fluid removal, regulation of acid and electrolyte status, though they are not alarming life-threatening condition. This segment is, you can say, very well understood by the intensivist and some nephrologists, and that is purely from the nephrology focus. This segment is purely interested in the interest of the intensivist, where he or she can think about the renal support in specific patient and specific circumstances. That what we call it as a soft indication of renal replacement therapy. And this is the difference between a renal replacement and renal support, where you give the support to the failing organ and here you replace the renal function. A little bit a kind of a glimpse over there. A non-renal indication of renal replacement therapy is also existing. We will not discuss in detail here, but that was a circumstance where we require a renal replacement therapy. And specifically ICU patient, what you want from the renal replacement therapy, a typically critical ill patient: remove excess fluid and treat fluid overload, correct and control azotemia, correct and control electrolyte imbalance, and assist in maintaining acid-base balance. That is the classical age-old. But here you wanted all these things with this condition. The goal must be accomplished without precipitating additional hemodynamic instability. I use the word additional. Most of the patients might be already having a hemodynamic instability over there. So from here our journey starts. What are the ways which we can really support the kidney? We can support the kidney by the peritoneal dialysis, hemodialysis, hemofiltration and renal transplant. These are the ways existing which we can go for. Obviously we will not discuss the renal transplant. We go for the a little bit understanding about the peritoneal dialysis, hemodialysis and hemofiltration, what we call is the continuous renal replacement. So by the end of our first segment, now we are entering into the second segment, which is most important from exam point of view, most important from MCQ point of view, most important from Viva point of view. A peritoneal dialysis, a typically peritoneal cavity act as a semi-permeable membrane, and we fill the peritoneal cavity with the reference fluid, and this is the catheter which is required, and this is a circuit diagram over there for the peritoneal dialysis. One limb is going inflow and another is outflow, and you keep the fluid in the peritoneal cavity, and that actually acts as a reference fluid, and all the solute and solvent can be taken out. That is a very a brief introduction of over there. Usually we think peritoneal dialysis is not enough for the critical ill patient, but we do come across with this. Sometime you may have a patient in ICU which is already undergoing ambulatory peritoneal dialysis at home. That's why you have a little bit idea about that. That's why I included in my talk. Advantage of this technique is obviously it's difficult or impossible to obtain venous accesses. Sometimes it's really difficult and no anticoagulation is required. That's why you can go for, and so many disadvantages which is not really making it important for the critical ill patient. One principle here is important for understanding. Either you want to remove the water from the patient, which we call as the fluid removal, or you want to remove the solute, which we typically call as the dialysis. So these two drastic principles over there. If you want to dialyze the patient, dialyze means you want to remove the urea, you want to remove the potassium, all these things you need to require a little bit larger dialysis volume, dialysate volume, and dabbling time. You require more time so that the exchange of the solute can happen. Other way, in the fluid removal, you require a glucose concentration to be high, therefore the water can be immediately dragged out and dabbling time should be shorter. This principle can be used in the so many formation of the MCQs. This is the principle where you want to have a low dabbling time, facilitate the solute removal or facilitate the fluid removal. Of course, these patients are more at risk of the peritonitis. The typical signs for the peritonitis is the pain, nausea, and cloudy diastolic effluent and loss of ultrafiltrate. These are the classical clinical sign, and in detail you can get from the ISPT guidelines. Now next come to our again hard core topic of the renal replacement technique related principle, that is the first ultrasound. Subsequent almost 18 to 20 slides is interlinked with these slides, so please try to pay attention from here if you are not paying before. Ultrafiltration, this is a blood is running in one compartment, another compartment is really not having any reference fluid, any pressure, and the fluid is coming out along with the something else as a part of pressure changes is happening. We typically call it the hydrostatic pressure. So water pressure gradient is there, therefore the solute and solvent comes out. This is called ultrafiltration. So this is across the pressure gradient, and mainly pressure causes solvent to come out, and the solvent drags also a certain solutes. That's why it results into the clearance of the solute also. Of course, what would be a determining factor over here? One is the pressure gradient, and obviously the pores, size of the pores over there, which will determine the how your solute comes out, and this method is called convection. So ultrafiltration across the membrane pressure gradient, and method is a convection. This is a ray diagram of your renal replacement therapy, which actually showing the ultrafiltration from the patient pumps goes to the membrane and return back to the patient, and this pump actually creating a negative pressure. So there is the pressure gradient over there. This pump is responsible for the ultrafiltration, and whatever coming out is called as the effluent. It is purely equal to ultrafiltration. So clear here? Now from here, this is governed by transmembrane pressure, and transmembrane pressure itself is the average of one compartment pressure and the result of other compartment pressure. It is the more negative, then the transmembrane pressure would be more. If it is a more positive towards the same side, then again transmembrane pressure would be more. Next thing which governs the clearance is the sieving coefficient. Of course, we can define it, but technically it's the purely a pore size. Large pore size, more sieving coefficient, small pore size, less sieving is there, and obviously number of that pores in a particular area. Then primary factor determine the filtration rate, which we already talked about, the transmembrane pressure, which is the average of the pressure along with the what is the another side pressure over here. And the solute clearance overall depends upon the sieving coefficient and ultrafiltration rate. Coefficient of ultrafiltration is also dependent upon what we have discussed is the purely a physical entity. There is no biological entity over there. Transmembrane pressure is there, negative pressure is there. But biological system is also having oncotic pressure, which is the opposition of your transmembrane pressure. So once you take all these things account, then you finally derive the coefficient of ultrafiltration. So everything will be there in the coefficient of ultrafiltration, transmembrane pressure, a negative pressure of the effluent along with the oncotic pressure. So ultrafiltration is clear. If now same thing is happening, whatever coming out from the patient as a part of ultrafiltration, if we replace the same amount of that fluid by balanced fluid into the body of the patient, this is called hemofiltration. So what would be equation of hemofiltration? Hemofiltration is equal to ultrafiltration plus replacement fluid. So hemofiltration is ultrafiltration plus replacement fluid. Usually it is a larger amount. If suppose we are taking 100 ml per hour and we are replacing by the 100 ml per hour, it is not really by equation you can fulfill the criteria. Technically it is very larger volume over there. Last segment will discuss what do you mean by the volume or dose of it. So again you can really see the pump. One pump will be increased from the patient to the patient. Now this pump actually inflating the replacement fluid. And replacement fluid you can select either pre-filter or post-filter. It matters from the physiology point of view here. Because if you give a replacement fluid pre-filter, then the overall filter will be having a diluted of your body fluid along with the replacement fluid. So there is a dilution of your clearance. But what will be advantage? Because the blood along with the replacement fluid, the viscosity is less, your filter longevity will be there. If there is a contraindication of the anticoagulation, you can use this placement of the replacement fluid. Another one is your post filter, either immediately or to the patient. So whenever you come across this term pre and post filter replacement, this is the pre and post filter replacement. But every replacement fluid is going in the patient circulation. So when we use the word pre-dilution, means it is a pre-filter replacement. So again here we are clear, we discussed the ultrafiltration, we discussed the hemofiltration. Now one more electrophysical properties we are discussing is if two fluid compartments separated by the semi-permeable membrane, there is a movement of solute from higher concentration to the low concentration. What we call is the movement against the concentration gradient, not against the pressure gradient, which was happening in the ultrafiltration. Now it is happening against the concentration gradient. You find a more number of dots are there. There is no dot over there. Over the time period, this will equal to the whatever concentration over there. What we call is this diffusion. So this is a ray diagram. Diffusion is active movement of solute here. Previously there is a dragging by the solvent. Solute was dragged by the solvent because of the higher pressure gradient. Here is the concentration gradient movement happening. It is the active movement of the solute. You call it as a diffusion. This actually happening in the dialysis. So we use the word very loosely. The patient require dialysis. Dialysis is the one mode of, like we were discussed, a different mode of ventilation. So it is a one mode of the renal replacement therapy. Here you will have a patient circulation on the one hand, another hand is the reference fluid will be there. The green one is the reference fluid not going into the circulation of the patient, it is in the diastylate and the solute is moving across the concentration gradient. You can combine all the processes also, but just to understand, I am taking the one process at a time. So this is diffusion. What is happening is the dialysis. So dialysis required a diffusion process. Simple. One pump taking from the patient, going from the patient. We are not replacing to the patient, but one pump is going to the diastylate. That's why this ray diagram is for the dialysis. You call it as a hemodialysis or CVV HD. We'll can discuss. Now hemodiafiltration. You can combine all these things together. Sorry. Ultrafiltration along with the dialysis. So fluid will be there. You can remove the solute along with the ultrafiltration, and you can give the replacement fluid also. Everything can be combined over there, so therefore we call it as a hemodiafiltration. Hemodialysis, ultrafiltration, hemodiafiltration. Dialysis is also happening, ultrafiltration is also happening, and we are giving a replacement fluid. What we technically call is the CVVHDF. From the patient to the patient, but to the patient is a replacement fluid. Of course, now you must become a more intelligent. You can replace here, you can replace here. When you replace here, you call is the pre-dilution or pre-filter. If you replace here, this is the post-filter. This ray diagram is the post-filter. This is diacylate and this effluent is coming out. Usually effluent is equal to ultrafiltration only in the filtration. Effluent word when you use a diacylate volume plus ultrafiltration. If I say my patient is only on ultrafiltration, 50 ml is coming out, effluent will be 50 ml. If my patient is on the diafiltration, then 1 liter per hour dialysis is going on, 1 liter per hour diacylate is going on, and patient is passing out a 100 ml negative, then effluent volume would be a 1100 ml. Only in ultrafiltration, effluent is equal to ultrafiltration, otherwise effluent is equal to diacylate volume plus ultrafiltration. All these things comes into MCQ. So when we putting all these things together, just to recapitulate all this thing, first is ultrafiltration, second is the hemofiltration. Is only the one thing is coming out, it is coming out of the patient but going into the patient circulation, not in the membrane. If it is going into the membrane, this is the dialysis, it is going into the membrane, going into the patient also, this is called the hemodiafiltration. So nutshell, just a revision of CVVH is the convection, that is a hemofiltration only, dialysis is the diffusion, and you can combine the convection and diffusion, and slow continuous ultrafiltration, fluid by ultrafiltration, and SDF, which we technically use a conventional using both. Apart from that, typically this modality can be used for other purposes also. Of course, just to understand, we can use for the plasmapheresis, we use for the adsorbent, but this is not really our topic today. Everything depends upon the molecular weight along with the concentration gradient. Molecular weight, sieving coefficient and concentration gradient. Lot of interplay is happening, and that's important for us to understand when we take care of these patients and we decide so many things clinically over there. Just I want to make you understand, our vancomycin is the middle segment over there. It is a middle molecule, and small can be go by the convection. So up to this can go by the convection and diffusion. Vancomycin convection better than diffusion. That's why most of the nephrologists in every reference will give you landmark vitamin B12 molecular weight. That is the actual which can differentiate whether this molecule come out from the diffusion or not. Small molecule, a small can come out from the diffusion, but larger will require a convection. That's why here is important principle over there. Vancomycin, if we use the conventional hemodialysis, then probably you don't really require a redosing over there. What we call is a non-dialysable. But the same patient, if you are doing a continuous veno-venous hemofiltration, then the convection is happening, the vancomycin can be removed by the convection also. So that's important. It's not a just simple thing, it is not dialysable, and we can go about that. And rest of the things, of course, the albumin and all these things, larger molecular weight, that's why we are not losing from any of the modality, either by the convection or by the diffusion. Anticoagulation, what are the options for? We can go for the heparin, low molecular weight, citrate, prostacyclin, hirudin, serine prostate inhibitor. These all are a choice for the anticoagulation. Especially the continuous renal replacement therapy, there is a word is called regional heparinization, where you can give the heparin before and neutralize even after the filter, because you just want a heparinization of your diacylate membrane only. And this regional heparinization can also be achieved by citrate. Like plasmapheresis, they are doing giving a before the citrate and after they give the calcium. So these are the different way of anticoagulation. We'll discuss in the evidence what is the better. CVHD, if we talk about by principle, the blood flow 100 to 300, and our conventional which we use the dialysis is the intermittent somewhere 600 to 800. So that's the way which we differentiate, and why we say this patient is hemodynamic unstable, therefore we can go for the continuous or the low flow rate. So till that there was a principle. Everybody is with me till the principle, because that was a hardcore. Next thing is the technique of the renal replacement will little bit softer, because this is more relevant in your clinical practice if you yourself doing the dialysis. First we'll discuss a hemodialysis and CRRT. Hemodialysis, this is the typical ray diagram from the patient. There is a certain pressure gauge over there. This pressure gauge is for the access, so that you can really know whether your this disconnection is happening or your access is not obstructing anything, kinking or the obstruction. This pressure gauge actually gives you a filtration pressure, and this pressure gauge gives you a result of this filter, which we talked about, the transmembrane pressure. Transmembrane pressure is the average of this pressure. Arterial head of the membrane and the venous head of the membrane. So these are the, if this pressure is very high and this pressure is very low, what can be a possibility for that? Your membrane is getting clogged. Same principle we are using ECMO. Before high, after low, that means something is problematic over there. And the filter is having what we are seeing in the one filter, there is so many small tubules are there, and the blood is running within these tubules, and the surrounding of this tubule would be a diacylate. So what you are seeing in the red would be blood, what you are seeing in the white would be a diacylate fluid over there. And this is the one unit over there, which we talked about, so many tubules, and this is the one unit where the exchange are happening in terms of the convection as well as the diffusion. Membrane can be hollow fiber or plates. A different membranes also there, right from the cellulose to the purely synthetic and semi-synthetic. Importance of here is a synthetic is more biocompatible. So only the issue arises here is that sometimes we come across the bioincompatibility, where the system causing a problem to the patient, activation of complement, coagulation cascade and leukocyte. So how do you really know? This can be MCQ when there is a possibility of bioincompatibility. Whenever you find gas exchange is worsening, hypercatabolism and increased risk of infection, your kidney function is not really improving, and your filter is getting very much clogged, and whatever you are expecting and your acidosis is not clearing, that time there may be a question of the bioincompatibility. But now the most of the manufacturer is having a synthetic only. That's why now it becomes a part of theoretical. It is more important in CRRT because all the time your blood is exposed to this bioincompatible thing. That's why you will find a more obvious manifestation. Now next segment is the diacylate fluid. It can be bicarbonate, acetate, lactate and citrate. Citrate have additional benefit of anticoagulation if you are using a citrate based diacylate. Bicarbonate, just few things you need to know. More physiological anion instability, there would be a problem for the instability. Calcium and magnesium can precipitate if we sterilize with the buffer, and apparent for the predilection to the bacterial growth. That's why whenever you see in the unit, that is the freshly prepared either the bedside or the diacylate unit, and then come to the patient bedside. So most of the time we are using bicarbonate based diacylate only, because subsequently discussed so many a problem with the other diacylate, and the ICU patients are more prone for all the problems. That's why straightforward we are using a carbonate based. Acetate, respiratory and vascular complications can happen, and that can result into vasodilatation, myocardial depression and oxygen consumption. It will be increased. Lactate, of course one can use it, but technically most of the ICU patients are at risk of the lactic acidosis, because the principle here is this lactate actually become a source of carbonate if the liver function is excellent. So there may be a compromise of liver function, then it will lead to a further additional lactic acidosis. This is the machine over there, more related to CRRT. Started initially for just for the pump, and you do a diacylate. Whatever you're doing for the peritoneal dialysis, you just have a reference fluid in the diacylate. Over the time period, this machine evolved a more precision for the pump as well as the more safety in form of the alarms. And gradually now we reach to this stage over there, so much alarming, so much sophistication for the precision, as well as the different modes over there. So advantage of the CRRT over the intermittent dialysis, which we are thinking is suitable for hemodynamic unstable patient, precise volume control which is immediately adapted to changing circumstances, effective control of uremia, hypophosphatemia and hyperkalemia, rapid control of metabolic acidosis, improved nutrition support available 24 hours a day, safer for the patient for brain and cardiovascular disorder. Why are we talking about the brain over there? Because a rapid correction of the azotemia may precipitate the cerebral edema. That's the reason which the CRRT is preferred. And maybe an adjuvant therapy in the sepsis we'll discuss. It's not really showing you much evidence over there, and probably advantage in terms of renal recovery. So much lucrative advantage over there, but the evidence all the time is conflicting. I'll not go into detail. Lot of literature is now flooded with the CRRT is equal to the slow efficiency everyday dialysis, what we call the SLED dialysis, in terms of every aspect, efficacy as well as the episodes of the hypotension or hemodynamic instability. But disadvantage, expensive, anticoagulation is required, complication, line insertion, risk of disconnection, hypothermia. One machine can be used for the one patient only, and you cannot really send the patient to the other imaging and all these things, and obviously increases the nurse's time. Next segment is the review of evidence. First, CRRT by Brunet, they actually gives you a difference in terms of the producing evidence with this diffusive clearance versus convection clearance. So now you understood, if we want to clear the azotemia, uremia and electrolytes, everything comes under the diffusion because they are the small molecular weight. If we want to really replace, remove the cytokines from the patient, these are the larger volume that require a convection. And convection, we know it is a ultrafiltration, and if we replace by the replacement fluid, it would be a hemofiltration. So that is the next ROCO study, that is one of the landmark study over there, where the renal replacement therapy used for non-renal indication to treat the sepsis, and they remove, this is the dose 35 ml per kg per hour. So 35 ml per kg per hour you are taking the fluid out, an equal amount of fluid you are infusing into the patient. What we call is the hemofiltration. And he compared 20 versus 30 versus 45 and concluded 35 is advantage over the 41, this 20, but not really great. Subsequently, so many studies, then the question comes from the evidence based, what should be a dose of CRRT? How much is too much? Lot of study has been done, but now we almost concluded that 20 ml is almost equal to the more than 30-35. So today what we come up with the answer is the intermediate or low dose is good enough for even there is no advantage of the mortality as well as the other part of efficacy. To know the answer of the same question, this Cochrane analysis has been done, and that shows the based upon the current low quality of evidence. The Cochrane analysis based upon the current low quality. The evidence itself is not very good quality. More intensive CRRT did not demonstrate a benefit effect on mortality or recovery of kidney function critical patients with AKI. There was an increased risk of hypophosphatemia. So this is the risk associated with the CRRT. If we go for the higher dose, intensive CRRT reduces risk of mortality in the patient with the post-surgical AKI. That is the conclusion for this Cochrane analysis. Next is the anticoagulation. Again, whatever the anticoagulation which we discussed, only the citrate is favoring over there in terms of the overall circuit survival time as well as the incidence of major bleeding. So just for a conclusive remark, the citrate is better than any other. What is the optimal time? How early? What early? So many a trial has been done, but important trial, I just want to, all the you people must know, START AKI. This is ongoing trial is going on. February, just this few days back, they closed the primary endpoint. Secondary endpoint, they still collecting the data till the December 2019. And they want to give the answer of by collecting a 2,866 patient. By the research question is whether we offer the CRRT within 12 hours or after the 12 hours. How early it can be. So that is an ongoing trial, and that gives you a conclusive remark. Till now, just a few months back, we have this trial early versus late after the FST. Furosemide stress test. They give a furosemide in the dose of 1 to 1.5 milligram per kg. Dose of the single. If responder, then they exclude from the responder, means started passing urine. If non-responder, then they randomize to the within 6 hours and after 6 hours. Somehow the primary endpoint is having a little bit of more mortality than the late, of course with the clinical no statistical significant. Hybrid therapy, actually comparing a CRRT machine, using the CRRT versus our intermittent machine, which is a little bit of prolonged dialysis, but not the keyword is not prolonged word there. Keyword is the low flow. We usually jump on the MCQ by the low efficiency slide is a prolonged. Prolonged is immaterial, it is a low flow. Then only you can, the primary is the low flow, and then you can go for the prolonged, and all the literature is flooded. We will not go into the detail. None of conclusive remark at this moment is SLAD is equal to the CRRT. And most of the this hybrid therapy, what we call is the SLAD, you use the same machine, deliberate intermittent, session duration longer, and solute and fluid removal in the slower way. So with this, finally we reach to the last slide, the take home message, and luckily it is a one slide only. Critically ill patient require frequently renal replacement therapy and occasionally renal support. Most of the time they require a renal replacement, occasionally renal support. No formal evidence has shown superiority of CRRT over the intermittent renal replacement therapy. However, CRRT is commonly used in hemodynamic unstable critical ill patient. You might be seeing routinely. SLAD is a reasonable alternative to the CRRT in ICU. CRRT affect concentration of drugs and clearances with different effect in different modalities. So it's not easy to really give you a dosing, adequate dosing to the, whether it comes to antibiotic or any other agent. Higher intensity therapy offer no significant advantages over the lower intensity. Here higher intensity means a high dose versus no dose. It's not a early versus late. It is a high intensity is having no advantage. Citrate anticoagulation preferred where no contraindication for anticoagulation exists, and controversy remains the timing of CRRT. Latest trial have added the existing dilemma. Thank you.